I know you're gonna dig this.
This is Rhine McLin, host of the Funk Music Hall of Fame and Exhibition Center's award-winning show, Funk Chronicles, recorded live here at DATV Studios in Dayton, Ohio. And now, zooming all the way from London, England, Hamish Stuart. He's a Scottish-born guitarist, bassist, singer, composer, and record producer, and was one of the original members of the funk group, The Average White Band, from 1972 to 1982. Today, we're going to talk about his history with the band and his upcoming 21st anniversary release of the album, Sooner or Later. Welcome, and thank you for agreeing to be on our show.
Thank you. My pleasure, Ryan. Absolutely.
You know, Hamish, when I look at your bio, and you know you're from Glasgow, Scotland, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and here you are, Scottish-born, bred, and you were with the Average White Band, who became a national and international funk band group. So tell me, how did you get started with all of this?
Well, I started out playing bands when I was in high school, basically, around about 14, 15. I just graduated, started another band, late 60s, we moved to London. And all the guys who formed the Average White Band were living in London in the early 70s. And we got together 72, like-minded. We all wanted to play the same kind of music, the music that had inspired us from the beginning. You know, people listen to people like James Brown, Marvin Gaye, all the stuff from New Orleans, Lee Dorsey, Stax, Otis, Sam and Dave, the works, really. And we had horns in the band as well, and they were coming from the jazz end of business, you know, like they'd listen to John Coltrane, Cannonball Adderley, people like that. So there was a big mix of musical scope in the band from the beginning.
So when you know, I mean, you play guitar, you play bass, and you do vocals. So was that the norm for the Average White Band, that each member had so many different talents?
It kind of happened by accident, really. I was primarily rhythm guitar and vocals, but I really wanted to play bass. And Alan, the bass player, and the other vocalist liked playing guitar too. So we kind of fell into it, because we'd come up with grooves when we were jamming together, and I happened to be on the bass on one thing, then Alan would be on guitar on the other, and it was a kind of natural thing. It just happened.
You know, when I'm looking at the history, and we talk about you know, 1972. Wow, that's a long time ago. In retrospect, but for those of us who are of that age, it just seems like yesterday. So So when we're talking about some of the groups that you were associated with, like Paul McCartney, Ringo Starr, his all-star band, the 360 band. I mean, how did all that happen?
When AWB, when the original AWB stood up, round about end of '82, beginning of '83, and I just concentrated on songwriting for the next few years. Then Paul McCartney called me up. He was putting a band together and said, do you want to come and be a part of this? So that took up the next 6 years of my life. And then after that, I had my own band for a while and made that album in 1999, the Sooner or Later album, and moved along with that, did a live record, did a Christmas album. I just kept working in between. I did a couple of things with Quincy Jones and people like Bonnie Raitt, David Sanborn, and it was great for me because I love working with other people, not being stuck in that band thing. And then the early 2000s, the Ringo gig came along, and I did that a couple of years, and I've been back doing it these last 3-4 years. So it's I kind of move around a lot. I enjoy that.
Yeah, because reading your bio and some of the things that you've done, you were associated with Aretha Franklin, Shaka Khan. You already mentioned David Sanborn, and then not only that, you wrote music for Atlantic Star. Their hit song, "If Your Heart Isn't in It." I remember that song. In fact, I have that LP. And then you did songs for Smokey Robinson. What did you do for Smokey Jeffrey Osborne?
That's well, with Jeffrey, I wrote a song with a friend of mine called Soweto, and Frank Musker was the other songwriter, and we took it to Shaka, who was doing a new record at the time, and she wasn't really interested. It wasn't really her. Jeffrey jumped on it, and I co-produced that record with him.
I was talking about Atlantic Star, Smokey Robinson.
Yeah.
Okay.
The Smokey thing is a popular misconception. The song that Smokey did was called "Sleepless Nights," and it was written by Alan Gorey, the other singer in AWB. So I get people confuse us both sometimes. So I guess that's why that's happened. But it's credit where credit's due. Alan wrote the song and Smokey covered it. But I wrote a song with a friend of mine called Ned Doheny, which was the Shaka album title, "What You Gonna Do For Me." We did that in the 1980s. So I've been working with Shaka a lot during that time, from the first album, "I'm Every Woman," and through those first 4 records. And that was kind of towards the end of AWB, so there was a lot of other things going. There were a lot of other things going on.
But I also see that you did work with George Benson as well as Diana Ross.
Yeah, well, I co-wrote a song with a friend of mine, Sharon Robinson, called "Cross My Heart," that Diana covered on the album that Tom Dowd produced. And the other thing, George was being produced by Arif Mardin, who'd also produced AWB and Shaka, and he needed songs, and I had a couple. I co-wrote one with Arif, and George did another thing of mine called "Never Too Far to Fall" on that "In Your Eyes" record. That was a great experience, and George was very generous. He's a great musician. Great guy.
Out of all the things that you do, what is the thing that you like the most? Is it singing? Is it playing? Is it writing? Is it producing? What is, if you had to rank all of your talents, what would be your first 3?
I I love doing it all, but the thing I think that I enjoy the most, apart from singing, is my first love. My mother taught me my first song when I was about 7 years old. It was a classical piece called "Wherever You Walk." It was written by Handel, I think. But then I got into listening to radio and pop music, and so singing. My mother and father were both singers, so singing was kind of like breathing around our house. So that will always be my first love, but I really love playing the bass.
That's number two.
Yeah, it's a physical kind of thing, playing the bass. It feels like you're really joined to the instrument. I do enjoy it.
You know, on the album with McCarthy, they did the comeback album called Flowers in the Dirt.
Flowers in the Dirt, yeah.
What was that experience like?
It was great. It was a very interesting experience because Paul had some things that he'd kind of started with Dave Gilmour, the guitar player from Pink Floyd, and a couple of other people. And he had basically we'd take these things and finish them. Myself and the young drummer that he had, Chris Whitten, and slowly other people were drawn into the group. It was a very creative experience. And it was a great insight into Paul's talent and how the way he crafted the record was really incredible. He was always coming in with new ideas. When I've listened to it recently when they reissued a special edition of it, and it's a very arty record when you take it apart. There's very many styles in it. It's a really interesting record. It's great to be a part of it.
And you know, you spent 17 years with the Average White Band, and then you also had the Hamish Stuart Band. In those 17 years that you spent with the Average White Band, what were some of the highlights of that experience? I know you had many, but I mean, 17 years is a lot of time to spend with a group. But what were some of the highlights that you are takeaways with you as you go through all the rest of your musical career?
Well, the first real highlight for us was being accepted, particularly by the Black community. We didn't know how everybody would take to these white guys from Scotland playing this music, and it was wonderful to just be accepted on face value. If the music was, the first time we played Washington D.C., it was our first tour of the States, and we opened for B.B. King, and the audience was mainly African American, and for us to play to that audience, and we had our little 45-minute slot before BB, and the audience was great. We came off the stage like 2 feet off the ground. They liked what we were doing, and we were really encouraged by that. So that was like an early highlight. We had great things where we played a concert that Eric Clapton was making a comeback in London, and we opened for him. And basically, it got us our first record deal because the record business, the whole of the record business was there. And it was a big shop window for us. But there's so many things, getting to meet and work with Aretha and the great producers that we worked with, Jerry Wexler, Tommy Dowd, and Reef Marden. And getting the seal of approval from people like Marvin Gaye was just, Marvin liked the band a lot, and he had us out to his house for dinner in LA. And then he came and sang with us at our show a couple of nights later. So that was a major highlight. Just the generally though acceptance from the audience and other musicians. It was a wonderful time for us. Yeah.
How many different record labels have you been with?
Oh, with AWB, it was just we started in England on MCA, and our first US release with MCA as well. Then till 1980 we were on Atlantic, and then we switched to Arista, which was coming towards it was the beginning of the demise of the original group. But that's about it. And we had a different label over here. We switched to RCA outside of US and Canada, so we moved around a little bit. And then when I did my first solo record, I put it out myself with a lot of help. But that's about it.
So when we think about your music career, I mean, I just noticed that you were out on the road in 2019 right before the pandemic hit. So
Yeah.
You were with what? Pick up the pieces, work to do, cut the cake. That was in like 2019.
Yeah, that was what I was doing with Ringo's All-Star band. And the other guys, Steve Lukather from Toto and Greg Rowley, who was the original singer and keyboard player with Santana, and Ringo. And so, and everybody gets to play their tunes. So one minute you're doing a couple of Santana tunes, then the Toto, Colin Hay, Men at Work, and then I'm doing my theme. It's a lot. That's great fun to play all that music.
With the Average White Band, name your top 3 songs that you like the best. I mean, I know you had to like them all, but what were your 3? What were your 3 favorites?
My 3 favorites. Well, we did a tune, a Leon Ware tune that we discovered on a Quincy album, which is, I think, was Body Heat, the album, and the song was "If I Ever Lose This Heaven," and it became a major sort of centerpiece of our show. It just felt like that, and it felt great to play, and we got a great reaction with it. That was a good one, and the song that I wrote with my friend Ned Doheny, "A Love of Your Own," which is on the Soul Searching record. That was great. Things like "Cut the Cake" and "Schoolboy Crush" were great to play as well. There was so much. We made a lot of music in those 10 years, and we always enjoyed what we were doing. If we started working on something and it didn't feel good after a while, we just threw it away and carried it. We only really finished things that were making everybody feel good about what we were doing.
When you look about, you think about music, and you think about all the different kinds of music. How do you see, from when you began with the Average White Band, how do you see music today, and how, what advice would you give to aspiring artists?
Wow. It seems a lot tougher now for young artists getting started, but also there's with the advent of the technology, the digital technology, and all the platforms that exist for people to get their own music out there by themselves. That's great, but it's a lot more difficult with big record companies. It's very hard to get in the door. So the only advice I'd give to anybody is follow follow what you believe in. Don't try not to compromise, and do what you believe in, and you'll find a way to get to somewhere. That's about it, really. You have to believe in what you're doing, and you have to follow your heart with it.
So I'm going to go back to the Average White Band. So since you guys, do you all still stay in touch, and what's everybody doing now?
Well, two of the original guys, Alan and Bonnie, the other vocalist, bass player, and the guitar player, still are what remains of AWB, and they have a group of side guys that they go out with, and they tour as AWB. Myself, Roger Ball, who was one of the other main writers and the other sax player, he has kind of retired from the road. He had some health issues that he's dealing with. Whereas myself and Steve Ferroni, the drummer, and the original sax player, Molly Duncan, formed about the middle of, around about 2014, 2015, we did a record together, and that's the 360 band. And we were starting to do a second record when the pandemic hit. Also, just before the pandemic hit, Molly sadly passed away, Molly Duncan, the sax player. He got very ill, and at the end of his treatment, things got complicated, and it was a very quick passing. So unfortunately, we lost one this past couple of years. But Steve and I continue to work together, and we'll try and finish the album that we started as a threesome.
So, as we move on, that I noticed that in, 1999 is when you did an album.
Yeah, sooner or later. That's the one.
Sooner, and guess what we're getting ready to talk about now? You're getting ready to do a release of that, and I think that is so full circle. That was your first, and now you're going to do your 21st anniversary of this album. Tell me about it.
Well, it's a funny project. It really, with the resurgence of vinyl, I suddenly thought sooner or later it has never been available on vinyl. And the 360 band album was available on vinyl, so let's do that. But then I ran into my first problem. The digital, the CD, was 64 minutes. And although the technology's moved on greatly with the digital technology, vinyl technology hasn't changed at all. It may have got a little more hi-fi, a little better, but you still can only get 45 minutes onto two sides. So like 22 and a half a side. So I had to do some serious editing to make it fit. I had to drop a couple of songs, and I made some fades short on a couple of little edits. And as I was doing it, I changed the running order as well. And it felt like a new album. And I just kind of listened back to it with fresh ears. I'd made the record 20 years ago, and really hadn't thought I'd gone out and played the songs, but I hadn't sat at home listening to the album. So to hear this new configuration with new ears was exciting and fun, and it's I look forward to getting it back out there again.
So you want? Can you sing me a few bars from one of your songs on there?
I'm hopeless.
You're gonna.
I'm not good at that off the cuff, really.
Okay. I mean, you know, it's no harm in me asking that as we promote your 21st anniversary of this particular, of your original album. That's just, what made you come up with that?
Well, during the time I was working with Paul McCartney, there was a lot of time on the road, and I was writing in my downtime, and when downtime in between breaks in the studio as well. I'm always writing. So by the time I finished working with Paul, I had enough songs for an album. But they were all, I'd co-written some things, so the demos there was no unified sound to them. The demos were different, and some were just vocal and guitar. So the first thing I did was form a band. In 1995, we got together, looked around the clubs in London, and found a bunch of guys that I wanted to play with. So we worked on those songs and played them live for a couple of years. And when I think about it, with hindsight, I really should have made a live album of Sooner or Later, because some of the songs have extended a little. It's because we've been playing them live. Some of the solos got a little longer, and the endings. So Sooner or Later was the culmination of 3 or 4 years of working with the material.
If you could change some things that you've done, what would those things be that you've learned in the process?
Well, there are a couple of songs that I wish I'd pushed a little harder on, because sometimes I think when you're in the middle of making a record, you kind of get caught up in the momentum of it, and sometimes in the rush to finish, things slip through the net. So there are a couple of songs that if I went back to, I'd improve them, make them better.
And I mean, we all look at things that we've done, and sometimes we see the things that we'd like to have, I don't want to say regret, but we like to have tweaked a little bit, and I can understand that.
Yeah. Hindsight is 2020.
Yes. So you know, so what are your future plans, and what are you planning to do, Hamish?
Well, hopefully live work will start. Like, I have a couple of dates at Ronnie Scott's Jazz Club in London, end of June. And I'm hoping if the lockdown, if things continue to open and it's safe to do so, then we'll do that show. And there's a few other things starting to come up for later in the year. As long as I'm not putting any of the guys that I work with in danger, and myself and other people, then fine. Hopefully all that will happen and we'll get back to it. I mean, we have to get back to it eventually. And I know that all the musicians are bound to get back to it, and the audience wants to hear live music again as well. We had, last year, there were 2 US tours with Ringo that were postponed to this year, and now they're postponed to next year. So there'll be more stuff happening next year. Plus, I want to, as soon as the lockdown eases, I want to get in the studio with the guys and cut the songs that I've been writing during lockdown and before. So the material's starting to pile up now. I got to get some of it moving along.
So, you know, I have to ask this question, and why do you think that it's important that we continue to promote to have a Funk Music Hall of Fame and an exhibition center? And the other part is, you can answer it either way you want to go first. What does funk mean to you? It
means a lot to me. It's been very important to me for a long time. It's like, I think the first, I mean, I when I was a kid, starting out in bands, we used to play things like I'll Go Crazy, those James Brown things. It's Papa's Got a Brand New Bag, stuff like that. But it was, I think Papa's Got a Brand New Bag might have been the beginning of where I thought, well, this is interesting rhythmic stuff happening. This is new. And then Say It Loud was really, that was a moment that it moved ahead very quickly. And then everything James Brown did after that, then all those bands in the 70s, like the Ohio Players and Calling the Gang, there was a lot of the funk music grew, obviously Parliament later, but the music, it moves you. If you standing still listening to James Brown, then you're probably possibly clinically dead. It's like it moves the body as well as the mind. That's, I think, really much like it.
You know, what's really so fascinating is to think about here, the average white man coming from Scotland, the home of Irish, Celtic music, and you just jump over all those genres to get to the funk. That's always fascinating to me because of the Celtic, how strong the Celtic music is, where you come from, and to jump over. I mean, you jump over so many different genres to get to the funk, which I found to be so fascinating because I kind of like Celtic music also. And when I study about you guys and how you all got jumped over all of this, and then to have some of the Celtic bands do kind of a mixture of the funk with the Celtic music, but you all don't do that.
No, we just let right in with. It's funny. When I go back to Scotland now, and I sometimes do shows with people who come from a more traditional background. I don't know what they make of. I mean, what they think of me. If they think I'm some kind of traitor for going off and playing music from somewhere else. It's quite strange. But I think there's if you listen to Scottish pipe band music, the drums in pipe band music are very, the rhythms are really, really interesting. And I can hear it in the way our original drummer, Robbie McIntosh, played. I can hear that mixed with what he learned from listening to the great American drummers like Clyde Stubblefield and Bernard Purdue and all the guys who wanted to play like. He started off as a pipe band drummer when he was a teenager, but he gravitated towards the funk.
It was just a thought. And tell me, why do you think that the Funk Music Hall of Fame is important, that we continue to make sure, and the beauty of having you, Hamish, be able to tell your story, and the funk era we do not want to lose. And the fact is that music is, I don't care who you are or what you are or where you are, music has a common thread to everyone. And I think that the genre of funk is so important to perpetuate your thoughts.
Well, it was a really uh, late 60s through the 70s, it was a kind of important era in terms of that music, because it kind of laid the groundwork for everything that's come after it. Hip hop would not be the same without the samples that were taken from all the great funk records, and all the guys who do that acknowledge how much the old school, or the school of funk, has influenced them. And it's obviously hugely influential across the board now. I think it's not just hip hop; its influence stretches right across the whole span of music. Even country music sounds a lot more rhythmic than it used to be. It has a huge imprint, and it has to be honored and kept going, really.
Well, I want to just thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule, and looking forward to you getting on the road with your show, and especially with the anniversary, the 21st anniversary of Sooner or Later. I mean, that's such an appropriate title, Sooner or Later, especially since we just come through this. I mean, that should be the theme song for the pandemic, Sooner or Later. And so I'm sure that's going to be a big hit out there on the road. I just want to thank you so much for your time and being with us. This is Rhine McLin for the Funk Music Hall of Fame and Exhibition Center's Funk Chronicles. Until the next time, keep it funky, funky, funky.
Indeed.